This week we watched Anatomy of a Fall.
I thought this movie was like very messy. Not messy in a cinematic way. It's just relationship problems I think are not very cut and dry. And we like to assume they are. And also I guess the mental health aspect issues of it. I resonated for the husband. That's how resonated a lot with me because I do see some kind of those habits I see in myself as you're not as forthright with your your therapist as you should be, and you kind of do hold stuff in, and your family and the people around you do have a different understanding or interpretation of how they're experiencing or witnessing what you're experiencing. So I thought how they showcased that was actually very true.
I like that it plays with the ideas of perception, how we perceive each other, but also because it's a court drama, how other people are perceiving you if you're like on the witness stand. Everyone is kind of watching everyone and reading them and judging them in their own ways. And I thought that was really interesting to like see that. I don't know. I just thought it was really good of like talking about all the ambiguities of like what it's like to be in a relationship in a marriage raising a child. um like how do you explain to a row of jurors your marriage in like a very concise way where they'll be able to like receive it? It's very tricky, and I really liked how they displayed that. How did you feel about like if she did it or if she didn't do it? Because towards the because like the first hour I was like, "She might have done it, but I don't care because I like her." But then the last hour, I was like, "I don't think she did it," even though she was, vindicated from it. It's not like a win.
No,
You know, it's not like she won anything. It's just like, she just doesn't have to go to prison. But her life is still, kind of in shambles because of this. I was completely invested in this from like that first 50 Cent PMIP needle drop that they had. I was like, I'm in, like, because obviously they have taste.
in the beginning you're on her side, and then at certain points you flip, and then you kind of realize
Mhm.
they're like once again perception is different. Like, and I love how they kind of also showcase perception in this movie visually, as the son is blind and
Mm.
all he can do is hear what's going on and what's happening. But throughout the movie, they do flip shots to his POV, even though he's blind. Like he's in the rooms, but he can't see people. But you could see him walking through the rooms, so he just doesn't know their exact location. Like I think like the ending is perfect, like where he's thinking about, is it possible of my father, deciding to kill himself, where he goes to the attic and he opens the door and then he looks down and the camera gives you his POV. Those instances like that were really pivotal. Because I found it weird because he can't perceive that fall, but he still looks down. The most heart-wrenching part of this is, you know, every relationship, whether marriage, boyfriend, girlfriend, even friendships have, issues. And I don't know how I'd feel if my relationship's dirty laundry was like aired out in such a public manner
Mhm.
like there was.
Mhm. To me, that's like its own trauma, like having to discuss all of those things.
Yeah.
And especially in front of Daniel, that was to
Yes.
me, that was the worst part.
Yeah.
That made like there's a scene where that lawyer, the other, I guess what is the prosecution lawyer,
Prosecution, yeah.
is questioning Sandra about Samuel, and I guess she was talking about his incident, his accident where he, got visually impaired.
Yeah.
And she was saying how she didn't want Samuel to put any negative feelings onto Daniel because it's like she didn't want him to think that he was broken or damaged just because he had lost the sense of his eyes. I mean, of his sight. And it's like when she starts to discuss that, like I'm not a parent, but like I can imagine as a mother, like really trying to protect your child and not make them feel like they're othered because of their, a situation that they had no control over and they have to learn how to live with. That almost sent me to tears. I was, like, on the brink of crying because I was like, "That is really powerful." Because it's interesting because it's like you don't think about sometimes how your words can come out to someone, and I really feel like she was trying to, like, shield him from ever feeling different or at lack because of his disability. First of all, great acting. This woman, Sandra Hüller, on another level, because it really didn't feel like a performance. And that's how I knew it was good. Because I was like, I can't even tell that you're acting right now. It was so heart wrenching. And he was in the courthouse. And I don't know, usually in court cases that are this sensitive, your
Minors
kids
aren't
should not
present.
be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should not be present. But the fact that he was there like every day and that he also testified twice, I was like, France, what are these rules? Like, can we not protect the kids?
I feel so bad for him because he has to experience that now as like a child. Like he doesn't have the chance as an adult to have the mental capacity to understand and kind of empathize on those experiences. And you kind of do witness that more at the end where his mother is acquitted of murdering his father. But in his joy, you kind of do see a hesitation of what if my mother actually, killed him? There's like you can see that kind of breaking. Oh, mom is home. She's not going to jail. But there's also still that hint of what if hidden within that veneer, and like that's like one of my things I love watching actors do that kind of stuff. But yeah, this movie is like a lot to digest and watch.
Yeah. Milo, who plays Daniel, phenomenal actor. Milo has kind of almost equal screen time with Sandra in terms of like, we're really seeing his story alongside hers.
Yeah.
And he carries so much of it so well. And you know who else was amazing? The dog. The dog was the star of the
Snoop.
show. Snoop Dogg. Like, he killed it. No, the dog was literally a main character. I'm sorry. Like, he was giving it. Like, he really gave everything that moment when he had to like act sick after he took the aspirin. I was like, yes, acting. Like, it was wonderful.
That's probably the only scene in the movie that made me mad because I love animals and I got a dog and I was
Yeah.
like, look what you doing? No, you gonna kill the dog. And I was like, oh,
It's
I'm just
like,
gonna kill the dog. Why? And now they're gonna think you're like have mental issues and you're crazy as well because now
mm,
you're kind of reacting toward what's going on with your mother and father and now you're expressing it in like in a violent manner and I was like no, I think that's what
mm,
one thing the movie does an excellent example of. So you kind of do empathize on both of them for him being bitter that he's now stuck in this, but her saying but you caused it, there's this is kind of your fault, so now you got to sort it out. I'm gonna do my writing thing. You took this mantle of homeschooling, teaching, and remodeling house all at the same time. And you can't do all three. You need to pick something.
she's a very flawed person. And I
Hmm.
like that they don't shy away from that. You know, just because she's the woman doesn't mean that she's automatically the victim. Like, that's not how this works. And actually, it's almost reverse in terms of like, if you're thinking about like stereotypical roles, she's actually more
The dominant
reserved,
one.
distant, do- dominant. You know, she kind of runs things a little bit more, as the husband says. But she's also not as affectionate or, you know, doesn't have a strong bond with her child as, or according to Samuel. They're kind of messing with your perceptions of like how you might have come into the film thinking that these people were going to be. And I thought the writing in this was superb.
Mm.
Like, because everyone's talking for most of it. Like, just all of it is dialogue for the most part. And I also like language, how the language is used, where it's like she is German, but she speaks in English. Daniel only speaks French, so it's like she has to try to communicate with him in the language that he's used to. She can only speak French for in the beginning at the courthouse. The dialogue and the language of it is so central in terms of like how we understand these people.
I think her switching from French to English, forcing her friend, like ignoring her friend's advice and saying, I'm going to speak in English, it forces them to pay attention more to what she's saying and how they have to actively listen.
Mhm.
They're not noticing her now mumbling and struggling to speak English. They don't see her as in a weaker position. They see her in a fully developed person who's able to express themselves and articulate themselves on a level. And like I think had she spoken French and struggled with it, they would have probably not looked at her, or the case probably went a different way.
I really related to Daniel so much because it's
Mm.
like when you're a kid and you see things going on in your house, you don't always understand like what it is, but you can feel it. You can feel that it's not right.
There's
And
the
I think
energy
that
there. Yeah.
the energy is so negative, and it just feels wrong. And you don't have the words to articulate it, but you can already feel it. And I really love how much agency they gave to Daniel, because even though he's a child, his experience is still validated in this. And I really thought that that was just a great way to depict kind of when a marriage is breaking down and going wrong, like this is how it's being received by the other people in the home.
The husband, his
Mhm.
like mental health issues. For me personally, I do relate to it because I know for me, even when I with my struggles, I've like I was able to rationalize when I had my major breaking point. Like when I went for help, I was still able to rationalize everything normally, but I was still able to compartmentalize and talk to my first therapist in order to not be in the facility I was in as long as I was. So I can see how her husband was able to talk to her therapist, like say, yeah, I don't need the pills that much. I can wean myself off because there's
Mhm.
also an aspect of you don't think you're as bad as you actually are. So, but now, like I've had issues before, like, oh, I actually do need my medication. Like I've had moments where it made me realize, okay, this is supposed to help me. Like for him, I think he was also seeing it, his mental health problems, and this is why a stigma that people don't seek the help they need to, and that was also an issue for me, is he saw his mental health issues as a weakness that he could not overcome, and that added to all that those issues he was already having. This movie, like I said before, it covers like a large swaths of topics in it. I do think this is one of these movies that should be included in the regular Best Picture category as well. But yeah, it's the Oscar season is looking up to be really, really nice. Did you like that clip? Well, you can listen to the entire podcast because the 16mm Film Crew podcast is available on all major podcast platforms.